every single one of our values are being attacked right now. And we're all just sitting around and letting it happen. So when I start feeling defeated and scared and anxious, I think of my kids and I stand for my values, knowing that in the end, good will prevail. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken.
Hello, welcome to our Manifestation Motivation Monday. I hope that everyone had a great Easter weekend. And, today Tara and I are going to dive into how to deal with all this chaos that's going on in the world without completely losing your shit. Because, we always laugh about how our Friday episodes, it's like doomsday and it seems like the whole world is falling apart. So, we wanted to just kind of share what our thought process is, how we stay in a mindset more so of neutrality so that we don't go down this tunnel of fear and doubt and anger and all the things. So I know, Tara, like you've heard me say before that sometimes all the shit going on in the world just really gets to me. And I start thinking like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself out there and allowing myself to be vulnerable to all of the hatred of the left? And with issues that are so big and so out of our control, it's like, sometimes I think, what's the point? It goes through my mind and I feel helpless and I feel angry. Like no matter what we do, we're just fucked. And I started feeling this way the other day. And I saw a comment on one of our TikTok posts about like the whole Trump indictment. And the guy that left the comment was disagreeing with what we were saying in the video. And he said that he was going to be on the right side of history, which is something, we've heard people say before. And this made me think about a speech given by Sarah Huckabee Sanders years ago, where she was talking about as a little girl, she went to the Holocaust Museum with her dad. And at the end, she asked him, why didn't anyone do anything? And he said, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something like there were a lot of good people that stood by and didn't do anything while evil took over, and how we need to learn from that so that it never happens again. And I feel like this is where we are as a country. Like that is effectively the silent majority. It's a lot of good people that think it's better to just do nothing than to stand up for their values and the values that made this the greatest country on earth. And I thought about the TikTok comment and I imagined that it's in the future and it's like the end of my life. And I'm telling my grandchildren about what happened during these times. And that there was a side that was removing the breasts of girls and castrating boys, letting them think they're in the wrong body. That there were parents who lost custody of their child because they wouldn't let them have surgery and hormones that would permanently mutilate their body. And how people just went along with it and said nothing for fear of being canceled when they knew it was wrong. But that there were a few people that did stand up and call it out, and good prevailed, and we stopped it and kept children safe. And then all of a sudden, one day, we were told that we were no longer allowed to celebrate womanhood. And even defining a woman was considered wrong and bad. Like all of a sudden, out of the blue, we're not allowed to talk about it. And soon, biological males who said they identified as women took over women's sports. And within one generation, women could no longer compete in sports, win scholarships, or become professional athletes. And everyone, again, just went along with it for fear of being canceled. But there were some people that stood up for those women's rights and for all the women before them that worked so hard to achieve those rights. And I imagine telling my granddaughter that this is why she's now able to compete in sports and get college scholarships. And I imagine explaining to her that they began erasing womanhood in the media by using men as the spokesperson for brands like Tampax and giving men the Women of the Year awards. But again, how there were good people who refused to be silent and let womanhood just completely be erased. And that there were people who demanded that we have open borders in this country, letting millions of people pour in, along with fentanyl, enough to kill the entire population 10 times over, and just with one dose. And how it became the number one killer of people under age 45. Yet the media and the left just kept demanding that we let it happen. But enough good people decided that they would no longer stay silent. I told her how schools began teaching young children that if they're born black or brown, they will have a hard life and be treated unfairly, while shaming the white children, pitting them all against one another, creating a great divide in people starting in school. But that there were good people that saw this for what it really was, pure racism and discrimination, and spoke up about how it was wrong and fought against it. There was a leader who bankrupted our country to pay for a war in a foreign country that we never should have been involved in. He refused peace talks and kept funneling our money there. There was evidence of him being beholden to China on his son's laptop, yet the media refused to address it, and everyone acted like it wasn't a problem that he was destroying our country. He depleted our oil reserves, and other countries began working together to push the United States out by refusing to use our currency any longer. Then the left arrested their biggest political opponent because they feared he could beat them and ruin their plan. But there were enough good people standing up for the truth at this point that they could no longer hide their agenda to destroy America and all it stood for. Tara, every single one of our values are being attacked right now, and we're all just sitting around and letting it happen. So when I start feeling defeated and scared and anxious, I think of my kids and I stand for my values, knowing that in the end, good will prevail. And if we have enough good people that start standing up, we can preserve our values and we can save our country from going downhill any more than it already has. And I know that one day we're going to look back in disbelief that so many people just stood by and let these horrific things happen. So the people that are on the right side of history are the people that are standing up for their values and what is right. They lead with their heart and not with hatred. So I'm just going to ask everyone that's listening right now to look in the mirror and ask yourself, like, what are you standing up for? Are you standing up for your values and what is right? Or are you just sitting by watching everything be destroyed? We can't be silent anymore, and we can't worry about being canceled anymore. There's just too much at stake. And this is how I kind of like get out of that mindset of feeling helpless and defeated and start to feel more motivated than ever to stand up for good in the face of evil. And, nothing worth fighting for ever comes easy, but I believe that I am on the right side of history. So I'm up for the challenge. How about you, Tara?
Well, damn, Stephanie, that was powerful.
Thank
Like,
you. That just shot through me this morning. And I was like, I'm going to get on my soapbox and say it.
yeah, that was awesome. And wow, like I'm almost at a loss for words because
Well, Tara, I think about like you've actually been a really positive influence on me with all of that because when I look at you, I see someone that has a lot of grit. And I mean, you've been through like the police academy, the fire academy. You went through 75 hard 2 times, which is insane. And you just like always seem to have that determination to move forward. So like how do you stay motivated and determined to not let all this shit in the world get to you?
so yeah, I have grit, Stephanie, but like everybody, it's very easy for me to let my fears and my worries like totally fuck with me and overtake my mind. And that is why I'm such a huge proponent of 75 Hard. That's why I wanted to share that experience with our audience and our Patreon community and have people do it with us. Because honestly, it really wasn't about weight loss or, developing healthy habits. Those are awesome bonuses. But 75 Hard for me was just, it's developing a mindset of mental toughness that enables you to develop that grit and that fortitude and that determination and that belief in yourself that allows you to persevere and get through the hard times in life. And doing things like 75 Hard or things where I push myself and I successfully accomplish tasks and challenges, like those kinds of things push me one step further to do more hard shit and continuously strive for personal excellence. And like for me, part of personal excellence involves standing up for my beliefs and standing up for others and taking a stand against the tyranny that's ruining our country. And I've talked about this in past podcast episodes, and I've written about it in the blog, but I was not always self-confident. I didn't always have the self-esteem or the discipline that I do now. And I used to be one of those people that was part of the silent majority and who didn't speak out. And a huge part of that was because at the time I was a cop and it was our department policy that you couldn't have a public opinion about politics and you had to remain neutral. But there was also a part of me that used to worry about like what were other people thinking about me? You know, I didn't want to be judged or criticized. But the other side of that is like being a cop for nearly 15 years and working in public service for 25 years. I was constantly in an environment that was like steeped in American tradition and American pride. And even though I saw a lot of terrible shit, I also developed this very patriotic love of country. And I was very proud to be in a position where I was able to stand up for others and be a force for good. And this might sound lame, but I truly believed in the LAPD motto of like to protect and serve. And I was honestly so proud to be a police officer. So after COVID and like the shit show of 2020, when Biden took office and our country started going to shit, and I was being told in my job to remain silent and keep my mouth shut and just stand there and do nothing while, you know, Antifa rioters and criminals are destroying shit. The country's falling apart and our government's basically being hijacked by a false election. Like, I felt like a total hypocrite because I'm in this job where I'm supposed to be protecting and serving people, and I was no longer protecting or serving anyone. And I felt like I was totally betraying the oath that I took. And at this point, like my public service career had instilled in me that grit and that determination and that sense of self-worth. So I quit my career because I didn't want to stay silent anymore. I refused to be in a position that compromised my beliefs. And like that's a really fucking hard thing to do, especially when you're giving up a pension and a paycheck and security. And then, you know, I kind of floundered there for a little bit when I first left and not knowing what to do. And when I started writing blog articles for Gary Collins, it just like fueled this fire in me to speak out. And it was like unleashing a beast that had been suppressed for 25 years because I could finally speak my mind without the fear of repercussions of losing my job because I'd already quit my job and I had nobody to answer to anymore. And like as more and more shit started going sideways in our country, and you and I started this podcast, which by the way, Stephanie, this is our 99th episode. Like
That
how crazy.
seems unbelievable, doesn't it?
I know our 100th episode is going to be airing on Wednesday. So that's just really fucking cool. But as you and I started speaking out together, it just solidified to me that I was doing the right thing. And the coolest part about it is like, I'm not doing this alone. Like, you know, the idea of doing a podcast was totally nerve-wracking for me. I wasn't comfortable with being on social media, but it was like my desire to be a force for good in this world was stronger than my fears of being criticized. And knowing that we were in this together and that we both felt strongly enough to speak out and take this risk and take this leap together, like that felt so amazing to me because I wasn't doing it by myself. And I love this podcast. Like doing this fires me up. Like, I love it. But there's also a dark side to this because we're constantly watching the news and we're researching stories. And the digger we deep into shit, the more and more it freaks me out to discover how fucking corrupt and tyrannical and oppressive and illegal and unconstitutional all the shit is that's going on in our country right now. And sometimes I feel completely helpless and overwhelmed because it's a total mind fuck when you're trying to focus on striving for personal excellence and being the best version of yourself, but you feel like the world is falling apart around you. And you go through those things of like the feelings of what am I doing this all for, right? And it's like, I feel like I'm straddling a fence because on one hand, I feel so empowered doing this podcast and speaking out because I know in my fucking soul that we are doing the right thing. And then on the other hand, it's downright depressing and scary to fully understand what's happening in our country while realizing that a vast majority of Americans have no idea what's going on. And what's even worse, there are so many people who just don't care. Like, we are being taught that being patriotic and defending America means you're a threat to democracy and you should be ashamed of yourself and you're doing something wrong. And last night I watched this show called, I think it was called Against All Odds. And it was about a group of Marines during the war in Vietnam and the Battle of Hue City, and how like at the start of the battle, they were outnumbered by like 8,000 North Vietnamese to 150 American soldiers. And they were like completely overwhelmed. And I was listening to this survivor talk about how they endured and persevered and continued to fight despite the fact that like almost all of them were severely injured. A lot of people died, but their mentality was to protect their brothers and fight to the end. And honestly, it made me anxious watching it. And because on one hand, I had this sense of pride. And on the other hand, it brought out this sense of fear because I just don't think this mentality exists in the country anymore. And all these threats of war with China and Russia and everything else, like, I don't have the confidence in our military. And I feel like we would be completely fucked at this point.
I agree. I think that this mentality is gone, but I think it's gone because never in our lifetime have we been in a situation where our freedoms were at risk. We just lived comfortable lives and took everything for granted that our ancestors fought for. And going along with the political correctness was fine when it was just about opinions and inclusivity. But I think we have to admit that it's morphed into something so much more now, where our freedoms are being challenged every single day. And if we want to keep living in a free, abundant nation where we get to live comfortably, then we have to stand up for it. But I do feel like the tides are shifting. And I think more and more people are waking up and starting to speak up. And that motivates me. Like, that motivates me to keep doing this podcast and pushing back any fears and doubts that come up.
I agree with you on that. But I also have that fear that we're getting to a point where shit's about to get real because people are starting to wake up. And we've talked about this before, how this government is not going to let shit go without a fight, right? So I am constantly feeling at odds with like trying to focus on gratitude and being high vibe and being in a positive state while also being a realist about what's happening in our country and not just having my head in the clouds and believing that I can just use manifestation to wish the bad shit away and be positive and that's not going to affect me. Because honestly, Stephanie, it would be so much easier to do that, which is what a lot of people are doing and just going about their day like everything's fine. But I know that even though I'm not a cop anymore, like my mission and purpose in life is to stand up for what's right. And what's happening in our country right now is not fucking right. And it's going to affect everybody if we don't collectively stand together against tyranny. So, yes, there is like a constant struggle to maintain that attitude of grit and remain aware and stand up for my beliefs while also not letting myself get dragged into these depths of like fear and despair and depression and anger. And there's so much craziness that's like going on that like you and I can't even keep up with all the news stories. And sometimes I feel like, holy shit, this happened and that happened and we need to talk about it. And, but the format of our podcast, we only cover that stuff twice a week. But that's why I think these Mondays are so critical. These Monday episodes is you have to find that balance between being informed and standing up for what you believe in while not letting yourself get completely sucked into the darkness. So for me, I think that doing these Monday episodes really helps our listeners know that we have the same fears and worries that everyone else does. But we focus on these practices and habits that help us stay centered and balanced. And that's what these Monday episodes are about. Not living in the clouds in, manifested land, but creating that realist viewpoint while also working on being the best version of you.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's this misconception too, especially with manifestation, that you have to be like positive and you can't be informed or know what's going on in the world. And I disagree. And like I have some, practical tips that I do every day that help me keep my mindset in check when I'm feeling all of that negativity in the world getting to me. So, the first thing, and we've talked a lot about having a morning routine and positive habits in place so that you can deal with any stress or fear or overwhelm that life throws at you for that day. So, I suggest consuming something inspirational before you look at any events that are going on around the world. So in the morning, like I absolutely will not look at any news or social media or open my email before I get in my morning routine. So that includes subliminals. I do gratitude journaling. I'm now doing the Tony Robbins priming and get a workout in. And then when I get through my entire morning routine, I reward myself with like allowing myself to get caught up on whatever it is I want to get caught up on, whether that's social media or the news. And by that point, I'm in such a better frame of mind to take in the world events without letting it suck me into this hole of despair. And I never, ever allow myself to start out my day with the news. Like, I first have to listen to something that's inspirational or motivating. And that alone shifts my mindset for the whole day and will keep it in check all day long for the most part. Tara, what about you? Do you like hold off on checking the news and social media in the morning?
Oh, absolutely. Like I'm 100% with you on this. And the first hour of my morning is completely focused on inspirational shit that puts me in a positive mind frame. Like I've had a consistent morning gratitude practice for about two years now, but doing that Tony Robbins seminar like really helped me take it to the next level. So I also now do the morning priming every day, and it's the first thing that I do. And then I usually, read one of my self-development books for like 10 minutes while I'm listening to a subliminal. And then when I'm getting ready to go to the gym, I listen to motivational, inspiring podcasts. And like you, I don't allow myself to look at the news or social media until I get back from the gym, so that I've had between my workout and my morning gratitude practice, there's a good like 2 hours where I've just been in a positive frame of mind before I inundate my brain with all the shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think along with the morning, if you also focus on not even the evening, but just right before you go to bed, I think that has just as big of an effect as well. So, like, one of the worst things you can do is get on social media or watch the news right before bed, because then you're basically priming your subconscious to focus on all this negative shit, since your subconscious is super vulnerable right before you fall asleep. And if you're watching something that's going to make you feel fearful or anxious or frustrated, it's going to be harder for you to get a good restful sleep. And this is where you can start to spiral and it can turn into a problem, because what you're thinking about before bed, your subconscious is going to be looking at all night long. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're in this like anxious, negative state, and the negative loop begins. So it's always a good idea to end the day on something like gratitude, where you've got like that positive priming for your subconscious, and just turn off anything that can be negative, like the news or social media. I would say like an hour before you go to sleep, but even if it's just like a few minutes before sleep, turn everything off, do gratitude. It will absolutely shift not only your sleep, but how you feel in the morning. And even like with those routines, there's still times when obviously like fear and doubt start creeping in, or anger or whatever. And I know we talked about tapping on a previous episode, which is a great technique for working through emotions. But another one that works just as well is grounding. So, grounding, or sometimes you hear people call it earthing, it's simply walking outside barefoot, like super easy. And when my son Aiden was colicky as an infant, I'd walk outside barefoot while I was holding him, and it was the only thing that would calm him down. So, why is this? Well, our bodies are electrical systems, and every electrical system needs to be grounded, right? And like you think about any species of animals are all grounded 100% of the time. But then there's the humans, and what do? We wear shoes with rubber soles. So we are almost never grounded, which is so crazy when you think about it. And they've actually done studies on grounding and found that when you step on the ground barefoot, your body instantly saturates with electrons. And it happens so fast, they can't even like measure how fast it happens. So, what does that mean? It means that you get reduced inflammation in the body. It helps with blood flow, and it improves just about every cardiovascular function you could possibly measure. And as a result, you feel calm and your mood is almost instantly boosted. So, when the weight of the world is getting to you, if you just go outside barefoot and reconnect with nature, this is a way you can instantly shift your mood and your mindset and feel like you can just breathe and let go of some of that stress. Do you ever do that, Tara, or is it too cold outside?
I did it a lot during summer, and I didn't even know the whole electrical system part that you just talked about, but it totally makes sense. And I used to make grounding like part of both my morning and my evening routine. Like in the morning, I'd make my coffee and I'd go sit outside in the backyard in like a comfy chair, and I'd put my feet in the grass while I read or listened to gratitude affirmations. And I would just kind of allow myself to get centered before starting my day. And that grounding really made a difference. And then at night, I would do it again, like during the sunset. because the sunsets here are gorgeous. And I would just sit there with my feet in the grass, and it was so awesome. And then winter hit, and like it just didn't have the same calming effect in winter, freezing my ass off and like putting my feet on the cold ground. So I haven't done grounding in a while, but it's starting to warm up again. So I'm excited to do it again this summer.
Yeah. Well, I just love it. And I think, I mean, obviously here in Florida, it's easy and I can just do it all the time. And I pretty much do walk around barefoot. And if I do have shoes on, it's sandals. But just recently, I've really started learning about these studies, and it is pretty crazy, like how quickly it impacts my mood. And so that's kind of like my go-to thing lately when I'm feeling overwhelmed. So just to like recap everything, I think that when you are standing up for your values, you feel aligned with your values, it's a lot easier to face all the crazy shit going on in the world than when you're just going along with something you don't believe in, because then you're going to have this internal conflict and you're just going to feel out of alignment. And when it does get to be too much, like there are these simple tools that you have that you can do. Like you have control over what you're consuming in the morning and before bed. Anyone can go outside barefoot. Like anyone can do tapping. There's all these things available. And I just recommend trying them. Like, even if you think they're kind of out there, just try them and see how they work. Because if you let all of this negativity in the world get to you, it can spiral pretty quickly. So just find a couple of things that work for you and try to turn them into a habit by doing them every day. Like maybe it's when you're making your coffee, you're going to journal while your coffee's brewing, or you're going to go take your dog outside and you're going to be barefoot. Whatever it is, just try to pair it with something so you can turn it into a habit and help to combat some of the stuff going on so that you have like this balanced, centered feeling and you're not going down the hole of despair. So I hope that that helps give everyone a little bit of, motivation for the week. And I just hope it inspires some of you to start really like backing up your values and speaking up about the things that you truly believe, because we need it now more than ever.
Yes.
So thanks everyone for tuning in. And we've got a good Weird Wednesday episode coming up. So we'll see you back here in a couple of days. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you get our latest episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you could, please rate and review the show. We are going to be reading every single review, and I would love it if you hopped over to Instagram at Unapologetically Outspoken and say hi. We want to see who's out there and start a conversation, plus get all of the topics that you want us to talk about next. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.